Uh-huh.
is I'm like I want to absorb it. Like I want to know all
Oh,
the information. And so I started reading that book, and like I was going really slow because man, it's like obviously I understand it. I understand a lot of the
no,
terminologies,
it's
whatever, but there's a lot of new concepts and new terminologies and the arguments, and he's making the arguments back and forth about why this is wrong and who said this, do it this way, who said, and bro, so like my brain is trying to
yeah,
suck in all this information.
yeah,
And um so I'm like, okay, there's no way I'm ever going to get through this. So I'm like, okay.
yeah,
Then he did a video and said, like, if you're having a hard time, just skip a sec, like just skip it, like read it,
yeah,
but try it, just skip through it and don't get stuck on something, whatever. So then I'm like, okay, I'm just going to try to grab the big ideas
yeah.
out of
Well,
each
that's the
area.
thing. Like over time, you start hearing terms pop up over and over,
Yeah,
and concepts, and you're like,
yeah,
oh, okay, I know what that means,
right, right.
or whatever. So that it's not like every time. I remember, man, when I first started, just like you, I was like, all of a sudden, I'd be like, wait, I can't, I don't even know what that means. Hold on, like,
Right. There was probably 3 or 4 times I was like, okay, I understand this conceptually.
yeah,
Like there was one about the referent and what's the other term? Another term. Anyway, it was so like I
yeah,
understood it wasn't sense, but it's like the referent is like what it is and then how it affects that thing. And so like
yeah,
I understood what he was saying conceptually. I understood the language, but
yeah,
I could not turn it
yeah.
into something that I could like get my hands on. So I asked Chat GPT, I'm like, okay, put this in terms that I can understand. So it was like,
That's
okay,
cool.
the referent is this is a car, and
Yes,
the
right.
sense,
Be that you have a Honda Odyssey
yeah,
and you call it a car because that's a loose term for automobile and colloquial term,
right, right,
but it's actually a minivan. So
right,
if you want to make this real this strict distinction, then you would say, well, a car is different than a minivan, but not in a
yeah,
loose colloquial way. And so the referent could be your Honda Odyssey and say, hey, let's go get in the car. And somebody could
right,
technically go, well, it's not really a car. It's like, okay, look, colloquially, we use the word car as a loose reference to automobile. So the referent is the same thing, but it's got all these
right,
things out around
right.
it. Yeah.
And that's the hard part about this kind of stuff is like, because as I was reading it, it would make the point, the basic
Yeah.
point, but then it would do all of that.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, but
Yes.
you
Right.
can't,
That's what I'm saying.
you can't do this
That's what
because
I'm
of
saying. So without that deep understanding, you're like, are you just trying to confuse me, man? What's going on?
I'm loving it so
I like
far.
Frank
Like I'm really
Caliendo.
enjoying it.
Are you
For
just trying
real.
to confuse me? I'm down here in Texas trying to figure this out. You just trying to.
Hello. Oh man, I'm loving it, but it's been a bit of a yeah. So
It's a
I'm getting
challenge.
there. So day one, it'll get better.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I think we're I think we're about there. Running late. So let me. All right. So is my I'm gonna
Bro,
listen to
did you
something
see
here.
my? Did you see the bottom of my Scarlet?
I did. I did.
What
Is my
happened?
microphone? Is it? Am I microphone? Am I this microphone?
Tap it.
Testing 1 2.
Let's
Testing
tap
one
it.
two.
100%.
Okay. All right. Good deal. I couldn't tell. Yeah, dude, we need to get you a new Scarlet. That's probably explains a lot of the issues. I don't know how that happened, but we probably do need to get some new equipment because it's been
5 years.
5 years.
I know. I mean, literally, I'm sitting here thinking, like, I'm sure there's probably no. Oh, look, my microphone is in a new place because of my new setup.
Right? Can't even see it.
I got to get it up here.
You got to make it look like you're an actual
I,
podcaster.
um, no,
Raise your seat up higher.
yeah, the, I don't know that there's any improvement on the microphone.
Right. No, I don't think so. I think that's still what everybody. goes to. It
Mm-hmm.
seems to be working real well. So,
Yep.
all right, can you see the chat?
I can.
You want to give us a Ken Bistarkey, chief meteorologist, weather report?
Chief Meteorologist Ken Starkey is checking in with us today, telling you it's sunny with 76 degrees of a high of 86 in Northeast Ohio. Once
You had a
again,
look.
it's not humid today. Thank you, Chief Meteorologist Ken Starkey.
You had a little nasal there at the beginning. That was awesome. I love that. The main meteorologist was out today, so we got
Yeah,
stuck with
yeah,
this one.
yeah. Just what would they call it? Chief Meteorologist, and I am weather specialist. That's how they say it
Weather
locally. That's what
specialist.
they say locally. I'm like, that person is somebody's nephew that they didn't have their they're not a meteorologist, but they needed to find a spot for him, and they went to broadcasting school,
Yeah,
and so they
yeah,
call him weather specialist.
that's right.
Hi, I'm weather specialist Ken Dillingham, and I'm reading Chief Meteorologist Ken Bistarkey's weather report today.
We were driving back. We were driving back from Tennessee, and we were flipping through some radio stations, whatever. And there's on this local station down there. It was clearly like some guy did the weather report for like 4 or 5 different stations.
Oh
But
yeah.
but he was a total and complete nerd ball
Uh-huh.
trying to do a weather or like a radio voice.
Was he?
You could tell he's totally a science nerd trying to do a
Yeah.
radio voice. It was amazing. It was kind of a little squeaky.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sunny
How do
and
you-
76 degrees, high of 86 degrees in Northeast Ohio. I was like, dude, what in the world are we doing here?
I was trying to imagine it in my head what it would sound like, and you just perfectly pinpointed.
It was pretty close to that. I'm not gonna lie. All right, so we're running late.
Jeez.
So we're gonna get rocking and rolling. It's all my fault.
You know what? Nothing's your fault. Nothing's your fault. It's just your roles and responsibilities.
Man, I don't know about that, but
You've got
we did
these-
have a good meeting, so it was good.
You got
I'll
this
be a little bit.
big time influence, and I mean sometimes that spills over into the podcast.
It does. It did today. It wasn't supposed to, but it did. So here we are.
Yeah.
So, all right, you ready to go?
Let's do it.
Here we go. 3, 2, 1. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Mobilized Church Podcast. This is Kris Dillingham alongside my big brother, Ken Dillingham, Jr. the Third, on a beautiful Tuesday. Ken, how's it going in Dayton today?
I think it's going pretty good.
It's got a new setup. We don't even know what to do today, man. It's all...
I'm looking. Yeah, I have to kind of look back and behind me to look out the window.
Is your family on board with this new setup? If they come
Um,
walking through not knowing that the camera's on them, that'd be amazing.
You know what? That is actually a great point.
Recording in session.
Yes.
Well, we're running a little late today, so just had a good meeting with Family Research Council and Christians United for Israel, and just kind of coming through and updating about some of the things that are going on. Family Research Council's got some really good stuff. You know what? One of the things I love about that, not that CUFI doesn't, but you know, I mean, obviously we understand there's the political component that's associated with some of those things, so it can be very combustible, say it that way. But they've got some good information as well. But Family Research Council, of course, this is Dr. Dobson's organization. He started years ago, and what I love is it's just good information about how families can put into them not anything political or anything like that, just good fundamental basic biblical concepts to raise up, you know, future believers and how to raise up your home. So really good conversation. So appreciate those guys stopping by. I had a pastor's roundtable this morning here in Toledo, Ohio. Your neighbor Wiley Reinhardt was with us today. So
yeah. He is the what, the regional rep?
He's something.
He's
Big time.
something. He's something. He is something.
He's something. He's big time.
You know, and it is interesting how you know, sort of juxtaposed some of the approaches. I think there are some places in our culture today that spiritual issues have been politicized, so that
100%.
even if you speak to them from the spiritual biblical perspective, it sounds like you're speaking into a political hot button item, but it
Yeah.
really isn't a political hot button item. You're talking about, even the, for example, probably the easiest, softball to lob out there would be gender.
Yeah.
And it's become a socio political topic, but yet the Bible is so clear in the beginning. Jesus says, "Have you not read in the beginning God made them
Yeah.
male and female?" And so you can't have any other. If you're a true Bible believer, you can't have any other perspective than to simply say this is the biblical. This is the biblical revelation. If we believe the Bible and that God is the creator and the Bible speaks to all areas of life, then when we speak to these topics, we're not speaking into a political, but it's interpreted that way, and so that's difficult. And
Even
I
Israel.
actually, that's Israel's actually becoming a very man. Anti-Semitism is growing even in evangelical circles, and and I think, Chris, the thing about it, when I think about these kinds of things, like, I don't actually like to get into the this, not that kind of conversation.
Yeah.
Like this,
Yeah.
in my mind, truth stands on its own 2 feet. I'm not telling you. I'm telling you in fact, like, as a minister of the gospel, as a preacher of the gospel, my job is to tell you this is what the Bible says.
Right.
What you do with it is up to you. This is what the Bible says. That's not a this, not that conversation. That's not a, well, it's supposed to be this, but everybody's doing that, and so now, it's postured in that sort of that in those conflicting concepts.
No, 100%. Well, that's I wasn't sidestepping the Israel issue, but it's become exactly what you just said. It's become so politicized versus the biblical approach. You know, uh,
Hmm.
I'll put my name in Jerusalem forever. I mean, there are the biblical concepts. We're going to the New Jerusalem. So like a lot of that kind of stuff, because there's such a political climate around those issues, and it's become so
Hmm.
politicized. Even stating,
Yeah,
I stand with Israel or something like that becomes a very hot button political issue when really
yeah,
it's more of a biblical posture. So anyway,
absolutely.
it,
And then
it was
people
a
be like, "Oh, you don't stand for Gaza. You don't have any compassion for the Palestinians." It's like, I just said I stand with Israel. That's a biblical position. I know, but
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So good conversation, and I think one of the things about this is not the topic today, but like this is the world we live in. I had a
it is.
conversation about, my daughter going to University of Toledo, and there's a lot of anti-Semitism. There's pro-Palestinian, a lot of groups and different things that are very vocal and whatever. Um, and being able to have good, healthy conversations in this. And I asked the question, I said, like what are some things you do to guide college students and whatever? And I gave a couple of examples about my daughter building relationships, whatever. And he said, that's the only way to do it. You're not going to
Yeah.
be able to outshout or whatever, or get
No.
the moment
No.
you engage in that arena of argument, it's over.
Hmm.
But you
Yeah.
build relationships and you have conversations you talk about, which is reinforcing everything that we talk about all the time. That's the only way to do it.
Hmm. Yeah.
So, all right, you ready to rock and roll?
Oh, what a great topic.
It's going to
What
be a
a
good one
great
today.
topic we got today.
So today, what we're going to do is last week. So this isn't a part two. I want to be
No.
abundantly clear. We're not going to call this a part two at all. It's going to be a totally different deal. But I will say, for people that maybe have not listened to last week's episode, which would be the episode that was recorded on August 12th. It has not dropped yet. It will drop soon. But so in that conversation, we really kind of focused on some statistics. You brought out some statistics about the modern church, the current church,
Hmm.
and how that the reason that we're really not fulfilling the missional potential that we possess is because we're operating on like one gear.
Yep.
We're functioning at one gear of the ecosystem of living on mission. So why don't you give us just a real quick recap about that? And then what we want to do today is we want to kind of we didn't get a chance. We want to dive in. We didn't want to just gloss over it because there's no way that you could do that and give it the attention that it needs. But we want to talk about the four components of a balanced missional ecosystem today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think that what is so important is for us to understand that we are clearly, as we mentioned last week, we're clearly the church is operating on a single um, a single gear, and that gear is the model is let's make let's make church marketable. No, that doesn't mean that there is, and again, that might be a statement of exclusivity when we say the church is. I guess we'd have to say the church is predominantly running on one gear. Um,
Right.
but because I do believe that there are people in the church that are having relationships. I think even in the most attractional model churches, I do believe that there are people that probably are, that are living out in their personal life. In fact, if there's any level of multiplication going on in the most attractional model church, this is what we're saying. Even in the most attractional model church, if there's any level of multiplication going on, it is going on because there are people that have engaged others in a relationship. They've engaged them. They've entered into their mission field, serving
Mm-hmm.
their neighbors, serving coworkers. They've taken it on themselves, and they're living like missionaries. So you
Right.
could have actually a church that is predominantly operating off of that single gear. 95% of the church is operating off that single gear. Let's make the church marketable. Let's figure out how we could get more guests through the door, take those guests and turn them into attenders, take those attenders and turn them into members, which is an addition growth model, and it's an attractional church growth model. And that's what most churches are operating off of. But we're not suggesting that there aren't levels where there are people that are engaging with their coworkers and their neighbors and their friends and taking them out to eat and doing, those kinds of things. And so if you do see any level of multiplication, which is why, Kris, when we onboard new pastors and churches to coach, that the first thing we do is we walk them through a multiplication assessment. And what that multiplication assessment helps us see is where their growth is coming from so that we
Okay.
can help them see where their actual growth is coming from. How much of your growth is just simply coming from big events? How much of your growth, and we're talking about not just simply, we asked the question, how many people got the Holy Ghost in your church last year? How many people got baptized? And those kinds of things. Was it the result of an event? Was it a result of individuals teaching a Bible study or having people in their home? So what we're saying is that today we're really focusing on this idea that if you've ever seen multiplication in a local church, if you've ever seen it, it's almost always exclusively happening in a disciples who make disciples who make disciples environment, happening as a subset of that corporate church that's
Yeah.
going on. What we're saying is what would happen if we had a balanced missional ecosystem where we didn't just simply say we need to throw away the Sunday service. We need to, who cares if the music's good? Who cares if we've got, multimedia? Who cares if we got words on the screen? Who cares if we got a fit team and people out in the parking lot? That stuff is just we're not saying that. What we're saying is that those things are all important for people to engage, people who come that don't have any other relationship. All those things are important. What we're saying is we're trying to create a balanced missional ecosystem, so more and more and more the church, the scales are tipped into the direction of missional, multiplying, disciple making. And then of course then the outcome of that is greater saturation in our community.
Absolutely. Okay. So 100% perfectly set up, encapsulated our conversation from last week. So before we get into the 4, give us the definition of what we're talking about with missional ecosystem.
That's a good. Okay, yeah, that's awesome. so an ecosystem is how everything interrelates. Like, for example, we think about the ecosystem of a desert. Like, what is the ecosystem of a desert, or what's the ecosystem of a rainforest? And the things that grow, the things that thrive or flourish, what you will go and see in a desert, in the ecosystem of a desert, is not what you'll go see in the ecosystem of a Brazilian rainforest. And so what we're saying is, when we talk about an ecosystem, particularly as we use that term in the context of mission, we're not, and we're not just talking about the ecosystem of a church. We're talking about the church's missional ecosystem. In other words, how that church predominantly goes about engaging with, training people, focusing on reaching the world, doing the Great Commission. There just like you can be on planet Earth and have one ecosystem that gets a lot of rain, and you've got this upper foliage canopy, and you've got all of these, you got rivers and streams and lush, vegetation. You go to another place and you see a lot of sand and rattlesnakes and cacti, and all of these things. So when we talk about an ecosystem, we're not referring to necessarily even the church culture. We're talking about how everything in that church, or as they speak to people, everything in your church, how it works together for the accomplishing of the Great Commission.
Man, great definition. Hopefully that's, I think that's a great way to launch into the conversation about each of these different things. And I think, part of this, Ken, has been part of our evolution. I hate to use that term because I know people are going to immediately jump, but part of the evolution.
Well, we've evolved. We have
evolved of our journey in this process. That I think because it's one of those deals, when you identify the issue and the problem, it's so easy to become hyper focused on, this is the main thing we're doing, so we got to stop doing this and focus on this place where we're very weak, when in reality what we need is the balanced approach, the balanced ecosystem. And there certainly is a place of, kind of, again, to use the overused illustration that we've used about tie the right hand so you learn how to use your left hand.
Right.
I've known people that they become really good at writing with their left hand because they broke their right hand and couldn't write with that. So they're kind of forced into that. So there's certainly some value to it, but how can we approach it from the balance system? And that's kind of what we're talking about. So let's just run through these four areas that we would call, the balanced missional ecosystem. The first one, which is the one most of us would be familiar with, and that is the corporate gathering, the importance and the value. And if I would say this, I'll let you kind of dive into this one. But if there's a pushback that we've gotten over the years, it was the impression that we were minimizing or undervaluing the corporate gathering.
Yes.
The crowd, the big service event. And I would just say this, certainly even locally, we kind of dealt with some of that kind of stuff. And what we're trying to say to people is, no, we're not trying to reduce the value. We're not trying to minimize it. What we're trying to do is we're trying to put it in the proper context of what it's capable of doing. And we've
That's a good point.
we've put so much emphasis on this, and so much of our missional efforts are focused on that we felt like we've had to confront that a little bit. So talk to us today about the importance of crowds, how that's a part of the missional ecosystem, and why it's important.
Man, wow. See, and I think this is such a good conversation, because this might be something that people would hear us who maybe heard us in the early days and they're listening now saying, wow, this feels like you guys have sort of changed a little bit. And we're like, that's why we say we're practitioners, not theorists.
Right.
And the reason why is because you have to learn, if you're going to go from a desert ecosystem to a rainforest ecosystem, you can't just simply start going and planting, yucca plants in the desert. You can't just go, you can't just go take and plant like, oh, we went and we bought, $1 million worth of plants and a backhoe and these big trees, and we're going to transplant them into the desert.
Yeah.
Because you may be putting in the right framework, but you're not putting in the right fuel. And the fuel of a rainforest is rain.
Yeah. Right.
And moisture and water.
Go figure. Right.
It's a rainforest, right? And so the fuel in a desert is heat and aridness. And so it's, they even say a desert is arid, And so I think that when we look at these things, what we're talking about is we've looked back through, and we've realized that, like, for example, so hitting on the question that you just asked, okay, referencing this idea of at the corporate level. I think the thing that's so important at the corporate level, when we think about these things, you say, what is the ecosystem, and starting off at that corporate level, which is, as you just mentioned, amazingly, that you just mentioned, and you talked about how that we've, in the past sort of sounded potentially like we minimize the crowd, the corporate gathering, whatever. But what we find in the scripture is that Jesus did have, in Matthew 5-7, the Sermon on the Mount, he did gather crowds. He did feed 5,000. He did, teach in the synagogues and in the temple courts. And so what we need to understand is that there is a missional function in a balanced missional ecosystem. There is a missional function for the crowd level, the corporate gathering, the Sunday gathering. And some of the primary functions are casting kingdom vision in the most broad way. It is the most efficient. Let's just be honest. It is the most efficient way to communicate to the body in its broadest scope.
100%.
It is biblical to proclaim the gospel and the message of the kingdom publicly. It's also a place where, particularly when you've got somewhat of a Christian memory, and I know people are talking about the United States as a post-Christian culture, but I believe that even if you've got some Christian memory, people who begin to feel the drawing of the Spirit in the United States of America, they almost always think of the church.
100%. And that's one of the things we fought against. Not fought against, but I think we wrestled through when we started talking about the purist form, which we'll talk about later. Like, as people start having spiritual conversations and start engaging with people, the people that had Christian memory, their first reflex was, as God starts dealing with places in them, their first thought is, I got to go to church. I got to go
Yes.
to church. And we're like, well, let's, we obviously we want you to come to church, but we really talk about your relationship and your walk with God. And as you were talking there, I was thinking about, Jesus engaged them in places that were culturally normal.
Yes.
You go and expect to have conversations, spiritual
Yes.
discussions about scripture and spiritual concepts when you go to the temple, when
Synagogue.
you're having, yeah. So
In fact, Paul's missionary journeys, Chris, if you go through the book of Acts, you'll
yeah,
find every single time that
that's
Paul
where he
goes
went.
into a new community, every time he goes to the synagogue and just starts talking to him about, do not the scriptures say this is the Messiah? He
Yeah.
starts there almost every time. He asks when the Macedonian call,
Yeah.
when he
Where do
has,
they meet?
where do they meet? And they said, well, there's a women's prayer group that meets down at the river.
The
Where's Paul
river.
go? He goes and talks to Lydia so it's huge.
100%. And I think that's something that we do have to recognize and understand is like that's going to be the place where people start having God consciousness and God awareness. Those are the people that you're going to attract. I love, one of the comments you made was like it draws seekers, skeptics, and the curious. You
Yep.
know, if you're here's the thing, like how can we capitalize on the value of the crowd? Okay, so obviously, like you said, the casting the vision, there is an important place for community and relationship and
Mm-hmm.
connections and
Mm-hmm.
belonging and being a
Mm-hmm.
part. Even volunteerism, we've talked a lot about how do you redeem volunteerism in a missional culture. It's a big
Yep.
part of that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us, so we see the value of that. It's a place where miracles happen, where God moves, where
Mm-hmm.
faith is revived in us, and
Mm-hmm.
we're encouraged, we're struggling, and just having that fellowship together in a service is powerful and important. What are the challenges with that as it pertains to the mission?
Well, I think the first and foremost thing is that today I want to nuance what we're talking about a little bit here, and
Yeah.
that is how a balanced missional ecosystem mirrors the Jesus missional model.
I love that.
I think if what we're looking at here is we're saying how does a balanced missional ecosystem in a church leverage every space for the advancement of the kingdom and the proclamation of his glory and whatever.
Yeah.
I think that what I would do is I would say what we first have to do is say, how did Jesus use the crowd?
Mm-hmm.
We would think and assume in 2025 that without any deep study of how Jesus approached things, we would think, wow, could you imagine the megachurch that Jesus probably built? If you weren't, if you weren't a Bible scholar, if you didn't have any biblical background, if you just became like if you'd never been to church and all of a sudden God started drawing you, you came in and you experienced new birth and whatever, you probably would look around and see churches and you'd see church of all sizes and you'd be like, wow, these really big churches are really successful. Imagine how big Jesus's church must have been.
Right.
And what we find is that person would probably be very surprised to find out that actually when the church was born on the day of Pentecost, there was only 120 people in the room, even though he fed 5,000 besides the women and children, potentially 15 to 20,000 people that he fed with 5 loaves and 2 fishes. So the question then I think that we should be asking is, how did Jesus use the crowd space? And
Great question. I
you see
love
what I'm
that.
saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that the way Jesus used the crowd space was to be a place where all people could come. Come unto me, all ye who are
Yeah.
weary and heavy laden. If you don't know a person, if you don't have a contact, if you don't know a Christian, if you don't know somebody who knows me, there will be a Jesus moment somewhere in a city near you.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus will come into the community. Jesus wasn't stealth. He didn't fly under the radar. He came into communities and healed all that were sick. But Jesus doesn't use that to grow his church. Jesus uses that to introduce the messianic operation of his power and kingdom. Jesus introduces them, and we know he does because Jesus's first words to the crowds were, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand.
Yeah.
So Jesus goes into the crowd and says, this is what the kingdom of heaven looks like. This is what the kingdom of the skies looks like. I know you've seen earthly kingdoms. I know you've seen Davidic kingdoms. But I'm showing you what happens when the kingdom. So when you pray, our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be in earth as it is in heaven. I'm going to show you at the macro level what it looks like when the kingdom shows up. All of the dysfunction and disease that sin has caused can be eradicated. You're going to watch me open blind eyes. You're going to watch me stop deaf ears. You're going to watch. And so Jesus does these things, even though he does all of that in all of the spaces. We find Jesus predominantly operating the demonstration, manifestation, and revelation of the kingdom in the crowd space. Why? So that seekers can see, so that skeptics can investigate, so that the curious can get more information. And I think we live in a world that continues to be, even if it's now not first walking through your church doors, but going to your website.
Yeah.
You will have people at that one first level that it's a lot less like, I want to go where the crowd is so that I can look and see and experience it and not have to have a one-on-one conversation with someone as to whether or not I'm ready to sign up to be a Jesus follower today.
Sure. Man, that's amazing. That's awesome. And it laid it out perfectly. I think part of what our reflex was in the beginning was, this is the single gear.
Right.
This is the single gear that the majority of our churches, including ours, was focused on, was how do we make this so amazing, and how do we use this to draw people? And one of the things you said was that really, I think, illustrated this was, institutions can't multiply, only things
Right.
with the seed. And so if your whole focus is on the gathering at a building, then you're minimizing the potential. And that's where I think some of the misunderstanding came from, of like, you guys are minimizing that. And no, we're fully aware of the value and the importance and how it can be such a vital part of an ecosystem, but it's got to be put in the right place. And when it's put in the right place, now all of a sudden it actually relieves pressure of, like, doing things that are good and whatever, but maybe don't really have an impact on more meaningful things. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yes.
like they're good and they're fine, but in the big scheme of things, it's not really going to make a huge difference. And so, but that's where we put a lot of our effort towards. So I think that's awesome. Okay. So second part.
And let me, I took some notes. Do you mind if I just real quickly?
Go for it.
Okay. I think you'll like this. Okay. I think you will.
You think I will?
I think you will. Okay. Because I think this is so important. I took some notes as to, and these are my notes. What happens because I felt like this was important for us to be able to say at the corporate level, okay, if the church operates on that singular gear, I wanted to figure out how to say this. I wanted to figure out how to say this without saying, so we need to stop being so attractional. We need to stop worrying so much. We put all of our eggs into one. I wanted to be able to say, what happens when a church becomes a single gear ecosystem for the mission?
Yeah.
Okay. Real quick. You ready?
Sure.
The first thing that happens is the mission becomes outsourced to the institution. Missional responsibility
Yes.
shifts from believers living as missionaries in everyday life to the church event doing the heavy lifting. So evangelism becomes reduced to inviting people rather than believers engaging their neighbors and coworkers. And then eventually the Great Commission becomes unintentionally reinterpreted as come and see rather than go and make. The second thing that happens is discipleship gets flattened into attendance. So the
Mhm.
corporate space by design can't carry the weight of personal transformation, and it doesn't have the power for multiplication. It inspires us, it teaches us, it shows us the kingdom, but without those smaller micro elements of the ecosystem,
Yeah.
it lacks intimacy and the accountability required for true deep anastrophe transformation. Number three, multiplication stalls. You just said that because only that which has a seed in it can multiply. Institutions and corporations don't have seed, only the people in them do. So we have to leverage people and get the people doing the mission. That has to be the element of your ecosystem. Number four, there's a cultural drift toward consumerism. People begin to view the church through the lens of consumption. What did I
Yeah.
get out of the service today? I didn't really like that sermon. I don't know why he's doing this series. The singing was sure terrible. Why don't they do? And everything becomes a spiritual product to be consumed because you're telling people invite them and come check it out. And so it subconsciously becomes part of our psyche. The fifth thing that happens is there's a leadership bottleneck. All of a sudden, what happens is everything has to be pushed through what we're going to do. Well, we're not going to do that here. We're not, and so because everything has to be efficient and planned, and whatever. No, and then finally, number six, we begin to have missional blind spots
Yeah.
because people aren't engaging every single day with the lost. They're leaving that up to the institution. And so they don't even really know how to sit down with somebody and say, let's walk to that together. And they don't know how to deal with people who say, I don't really believe the Bible.
Yeah.
Because they only know reaching people through the mechanism of come check it out, you will love it. And if somebody goes, yeah, I don't love it, or I don't believe in that, or
Right.
so what do we do? So we have missional
Right.
blind spots. So there's six things that I believe happens if you don't have a balanced missional ecosystem, if you only have the corporate crowd level.
I love it. I loved it. I thought it was
Did
amazing.
you? Okay,
Yeah, I
good,
loved it.
good,
Yeah,
good,
so you're
good. Thank you.
right on target there. So, all right. So the second ecosystem, or the
Uh-huh.
second place for a balanced missional ecosystem, mid-sized meetings,
Mm.
which are homes and communities. This is smaller meetings, but it's similar.
Mhm.
So talk to us about how it's different from crowds.
Mhm.
So like it's kind of sandwiched between crowd and discipleship groups. We'll talk about discipleship
Mhm.
groups in a minute. So what is it and what's its function? Why does it how does it help foster
Well,
this balanced system?
so I'll be brief on this. I'm going to be brief because I think we've already set it up. Of We're talking about how does a balanced missional ecosystem mirror
Sure.
Jesus's missional model. Um, and I think what we find is we find Jesus in homes. We find Jesus in he goes into a community, but then we find him next in a more intimate setting. It might be crowded in the home, right? We talk about
Yeah.
the people that the four that got on the roof and opened up the roof and let the paralyzed guy down on the cot, on ropes because there was no room for him. So when we talk about, we're not saying that Jesus went into homes and it was as opposed to crowds because sometimes it was crowded in the home.
Right.
But I
Right.
think it's important to say, well, what was Jesus doing? What was he doing in the homes? And I believe that what Jesus was doing in the homes was it. I believe that there were two primary things, and just in my thinking, I'm not saying these are the only two because you may have one or two others that you'd like to
Yeah.
add to this.
Okay.
But I believe that the two primary things that Jesus was doing was, number one, was he was allowing those seekers, skeptics, and curious who had become somewhat convinced. This certainly does seem real. This certainly does feel right. It ticks all the boxes of the Messiah.
Mm-hmm.
It allows them to have a a a one level more intimate exploration. And so what I would say is that the smaller or the mid-sized meeting, the home, whatever, was where there were two primary functions. Number one was to give people an opportunity to dialogue on a little deeper level
Sure.
and to enter into that sort of relational space. I think the other thing that it did was it invited people to another level of commitment
Sure.
before they were ready for the smaller the discipleship connection. I need to know. Okay. I love what I saw. Jesus told the crowd, here's the deal. There were people, I think I said it in our last podcast. I mentioned that there were people who followed Jesus for the fishes and loaves.
Sure.
Jesus said, you do follow me, fishes and loaves.
Sure.
But then there were people that were a part of his micro community, the micro ecosystem, or the micro dynamic. James and John, they followed Jesus to drink the cup that he drank. And so you could follow Jesus for the fishes and loaves at the crowd level.
Yeah.
But if you're going to follow him for the cup that he drinks, you're going to have to move through. So I think, Kris, I would just simply say that the homes and communities are those places where people are given entrance and access into a deeper level of relationship where they can dialogue, get some deeper understanding about. So tell me again, what did you mean when you said, if any man comes after me, he must first deny himself, take up his cross and follow me? What did you mean by that? I don't understand that fully. And so this could be a place to situate those seekers, those or it might be the first entry point of a seeker, somebody who doesn't want to come out in the crowd and see. So I think in a modern context, Kris, we would say it like this: there may be people that might not be, for many reasons, they might not be ready or willing to walk through the church doors.
Sure.
But they're ready to engage. Ed Stetzer in the book Lost and Found said 40% of people are open to an invitation to a church service, but of that same group, 80% were open to a spiritual conversation where they explored spiritual topics of interest and to them, and also to hear how people experience transformation. 40% were open to an invitation to a church service. 80% were open. So I think for us in a modern context, using the Jesus model, but saying, let's mirror that and have a balanced ecosystem. I think we need to look at this and say, I think this could be a place that there's a whole lot of people that have been on the website or whatever that have come into contact with some Jesus people, where we can invite them in and have those engagement conversations in our modern context.
Absolutely. The only thing that I would add to that is, in a disconnected world, it's easy to come into the crowd, the large gathering, and just kind of blend in and not really build any deep, meaningful connections or whatever. And so not that has to happen, but it's just easier to happen. You see people, you wave at them, you walk past them, whatever. I think one of the components of that next level down, as you said, I was going to say the same thing. It's like, it's not somebody maybe sometimes who's like, hey, I'm ready to go all in. What do I got to do? I'm going to sell my house. I'm going to do, but that person that's like, man, I want to know a little bit more about what this means and what this is, without them feeling like they're called out or whatever. They can come, be around it, be able to ask the questions. And one of the things I think that can happen in that environment is you start to build deeper relationships,
Mhm.
because that's the key. That's
Hmm.
the environment where real questions start to get answered. That's
That's a
the
good point.
question where you take a principle. So Jesus talks about, forgiving people or hating your enemies. And that's an environment where somebody can come in and be like, hey, I got a question about this, without feeling like being
Hmm.
personally directed at them, or, what I'm saying? Like unloading all of their stuff, because they may not be
Mm.
there yet. But yet it's moving them along to that next step of just, I'm not just blending in the crowd and being the
Mhm.
beneficiary and recipient of the great teaching of Jesus and the miraculous things that
Mhm.
happen and whatever. Now I'm kind of ready, like, what's that
Mhm.
next step going to look like? And I need to build relationships if I'm going to take that next step.
Well, and I think that what you're mentioning there, it it behooves us to say, based on what you just mentioned, I think it behooves us to say that I believe that Jesus was intentionally using that mid-sized space
Yeah.
to, let's not forget that Jesus was demonstrating at the crowd level, at the macro level, this is what the kingdom looks like in earth.
Yeah.
I think that at the second level, that mid-sized level, I think Jesus is saying this is what the kingdom looks like in community.
Bro.
I think
100%.
I think Jesus is growing. So at the macro level, at the widest scope crowd level, the kingdom is showing up, and people are like, "Wow!" But without the relational element, and Jesus was clear: love the Lord with all your heart. I told my wife the other day, and oh my goodness, I hope I'm not. I hope I'm not. I hope I'm not doing something bad here by saying this, because I don't honestly know any church. Stop me if you know a church called Vertical Church.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. So I told her, I said, the dumbest possible name that you could name a church is Vertical Church. And she's like, well, why? And I said, because nothing about the church is predominantly vertical.
Right.
The church is predominantly about loving your neighbors yourself. It's predominantly about, now I get it. We come to church and we worship, and there I know that there's the vertical element, but I'm talking about the idea of the church is the called out ones. The church is the gathering of all of these people. Now together we go vertical, absolutely. But this is where we think of others. This is where we serve others. This is where we consider others more than ourselves. And why is this important? Because Jesus often talked about at the crowd level, this is the kingdom is love the Lord. What are the two commandments? Love the Lord with all your heart, love your neighbors yourself. If Jesus is creating a kingdom community, he's got to create a space where those things aren't just simply philosophically talked about, but they are relationally lived out.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that Jesus uses the mid-sized meeting in the houses and the homes inside the community. He's already been out there healing people. People come into a home, he's eating a meal. Now this is a more intimate setting, and Jesus is beginning to show them, now this is what the kingdom looks like when we start fostering kingdom community, and this is our identity, and these are our shared practices, and this is what it's going to look like in
Yeah.
when the kingdom is with men.
Man, that's so good. That's so good. All right. So let's get to let's move through these. Um, so drilling down, we're just continuing to drill down, and we see this in the ministry of Jesus so many times. You have the, like you said, the larger crowd. As you're talking there, I was thinking about the encounters and the experiences that happened, in the home, the paralytic man let down through the
Mm-hmm.
roof, where, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
so he's able to drill down a little bit more into to kingdom principles something was fostered in these guys. It's like, man, now I have an opportunity to get them directly to Jesus. So then the next level
Mm,
is the smaller discipleship connections, which is the micro discipleship ecosystem.
mm.
And this is really the place where the magic,
This is it, man.
this is the secret
Secret sauce,
sauce of
100%.
everything. This is where the magic happens. And we see this in Jesus. Okay, so like you said, let's talk about it. What did Jesus do? Why did Jesus go up into a mountain and pray and then call in the 12?
Hmm.
Why did Jesus spend the majority of his time with the 12 and then even drill down a little bit further, even into the 3,
Hmm.
that he took them to places that others didn't get to go to and whatever? What is the value? Why did Jesus do that? What was he trying to show us and communicate in
Mm.
this part of the mission?
Mm. BTW, lest we, in our modern Western programmatic linear brains,
Okay.
think that what we're showing is that what happens at the
Yes. I'm
macro, then
glad
it
you
gets to
said
this,
this.
then it gets to this. BTW, Jesus called the 12 first.
Yes.
Jesus did not go out to the crowd and start there. Jesus didn't go out to the crowd
Right.
and draw this crowd and then start pulling in from the crowd mid-level leaders. And then this, if you think from an institutional perspective, then you're going to start thinking, okay, well, what Jesus did was Jesus went and drew this great big circle, and then he drew some smaller circles and he put some people in that, and then some smaller circles and put people in that. Actually, in a balanced missional ecosystem,
There you go. All of
there's
this.
there's entrance and access. There's some people, in fact, we're going to say that when the Jesus movement really gets off the ground,
Yeah.
there's actually less of the crowd level and more of the micro. The macro begins to be diminished over time against the micro.
Mm. Mm.
So I'm just pointing that out.
It's a great
It,
point. I'm glad
it
you said that, because it's so easy to think that linear view, and my brain happens to think like that more than I would care to admit. So yeah, 100%. We're not talking about you drill down, you get the bigger crowd, then you drill down to your 70, and then you drill down to your 12. These are all things that should be happening simultaneously in a healthy ecosystem.
bro, Jesus comes down out of the, you know, he comes down out of the wilderness, the temptation, the
Yeah.
40-day fasting, and he comes down in Luke 4, and he comes to the synagogue and said, "This day is the scripture fulfilled in your ears," and that's his declaration. That is the declaration of his messiahship.
Yeah.
But then we find him going to Simon and Andrew and James and John, who are washing their nets and mending their nets, and says, "Come follow me and I'll make you fishers of men." So we see that Jesus had a balanced missional ecosystem. He
Sure.
he 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 starts off at the mid-size meeting, which I don't think is the crowd. I don't think the synagogue is the crowd space.
Sure.
Okay, I think the synagogue would be more akin to a home. It would be more akin to, there's in a community maybe 60, 70, 100 people there, maybe whatever. Uh, um, Jesus goes there first, then he goes to the disciples, then he says, let's go out and preach this out in the highways and byways. So I
Yeah.
think this is powerful. I think this is important that we recognize that eventually what happens is, and we see this on these smaller discipleship connections, these micro discipleship ecosystems, the 12 and the 3, like you mentioned. Man, if there's dialogue and accountability and community and and accessibility and challenge that's happening in the mid-size level, it just goes to a whole new level at the micro level.
Yeah.
Because you got 3, 4, 5 people, in our in sort of the principles and concepts we promote. There's intensive life on life transformation, or life formation, right? Our lives being formed into the image of Christ. That's transformation from what we were, from where we were to what we're going to.
Right.
Uh, there's greater example, or excuse me, access to Jesus' example. There's greater relational connectivity. So the encouragement's deeper, but the correction's also deeper.
Yeah.
Um, I
Yeah.
think that there's greater preparation for leadership and reproduction. Jesus, the disciples say to Jesus, Lord, why do you do some things differently at our level than you do at the community level? Why don't you do the same things with the crowds that you do with us?
Yeah.
AKA speaking in parables. Um,
Or
or
even
as an example.
understanding the parables.
There
I
it
don't
is.
understand how this applies to my life, which in the crowd, a lot of times you have people, as preachers, you can't caveat everything. You can't
Right.
nuance everything. And so there's no way you can go in and preach every topic from an exhaustive standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody can take that and misapply it or
Mm-hmm.
misunderstand it or misunderstand what you're saying or whatever. And that happens a lot of times in that crowd level. In this level, you're able to drill down on things that they're confused about or things that
Mm-hmm.
God's working in them, or
Mm-hmm.
we preach things that maybe it wasn't specifically related to this in the crowd level, and God's working in this area of the person,
Yeah.
and they heard something. They heard the Spirit of God speak to something in their life. They're able to deal with that. And you see Jesus doing this over and over with the disciples, over and over again. He was answering places, he was answering questions, he was identifying fears. I was thinking about on the boat. He's got his core group on the boat, and the storm's
Mm-hmm.
coming, and he's addressing their lack of faith. You just
Yeah.
came and you just got all of this, the fishes in the loaves.
Bro.
Have you already forgotten about the miracle of the
Yeah.
fish? He's able to address places of unbelief in them that he couldn't even do at the corporate
Right.
level, even though they experienced the miracle.
Yeah. They forgot.
Have
The
you
Bible
already
says,
forgotten?
because they'd forgotten them, um, the miracles of the fishes and loaves. And this is the thing, Kris, where I think that what's so important as we discuss this is to really highlight that Jesus doesn't take questions during the Sermon on the Mount.
When the Q&A?
No, it is declaration. It's monologue.
Mm-hmm.
It's not dialogue at the Sermon on the Mount. Why? Because because it's
It's a great point.
understood. When you're speaking to a crowd, you're making a declaration of meta principles.
Yeah.
It's meta. You, this is the kingdom as it relates to all of us in every way.
Yeah.
But then Jesus, like you just said, gets alone with the disciples and says, this is what this means for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what's happening in so many churches, and people, and you've got these, these books that have been written about, how shallow Christians are today. Barna is, some of the Barna research, some of the Pew Research stuff. We've got statistics, Kris. We got statistics coming out our ears for this podcast that we could quote. We quoted some of them in our last podcast. We've got statistics that deal with the fact that, we could talk about statistics that um, a third of people who call themselves Christians don't believe that the Bible is inerrant.
Right.
That there's that 25% of people that call themselves Christian don't believe in the virgin birth,
Yeah.
right? And you're like, how in the name of God can people even call themselves Christian? Good question. Good question. Because they're allowed to call themselves Christian at the crowd level.
Sure.
They're allowed to call themselves Christians at the macro level. And and this is the thing. That's why Jesus said, you do follow me for the fishes and loaves. You know what Jesus was saying to them? You're not real followers.
Yeah.
You're following food. You're not
Right.
following me. You think you're following me. You're following food.
Yeah.
And I think that Jesus could come to a lot of, look, I think Jesus could come to a lot of churches in North America and say, you're not following me. You're following this show. You're
Right.
not, you
Right.
know,
Sure.
and I think that what is so important and what you just mentioned, and this is so vital, bro, is that what you just demonstrated when you were talking about with the disciples was that at the meta level, at the macro level, Jesus is talking about what is meta? Meta is as it relates to all of us in every way. These are the universal kingdom principles
Yeah.
that apply to everybody. But at the micro level, Jesus is able to have conversations with the disciples that say, those principles apply to you, but this is what it's going to look like in your future, in your
Yeah.
daily life, in your, that's the thing. There's where the transformation happens. And the deeper the transformation, the greater the maturity. And we know, thank God, that 10-year-olds don't have babies. There's a level of maturity that's reached until reproduction begins to happen. And I'm not saying that a person has to be in church for a certain amount of time. My point is that transformation, is that maturing and growing, and and once it becomes, it has the ability to reproduce. And I'm just, man, I'm just excited about this idea that we could literally have that full Jesus modeled microsystem,
Yeah.
ecosystem, I mean, in in our churches today.
Think about the places that would have been missed, right? As you're talking there, I'm just thinking about scripturally all the examples. Jesus comes to him, and in that setting says, "Who do men say that I am?"
Yeah.
Right, right. It's in
Yeah.
that moment. It's in that moment that Peter is able to express the revelation, the understanding that God has given him. We know who you are. You are the Christ. And so that happens there. And then you think about, at leading up to the final days and even after the death of Jesus, um, the encounters that they had with him to
Mm-hmm.
understand and to know
Mm-hmm.
what he's talking about and what's going
Mm-hmm.
on there. It's missed. It's so much. And I wonder how many times we have people that are uncertain, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they had questions. We know and believe he's the Christ, and Jesus was able in that moment to bring them into a place of tension of like, you need to declare it, you need to speak it. It needs to be something that comes from you and express it. How many times do people, because they don't have that kind of connection, Ken,
Mm.
they walk away and they have maybe some questions swirling, or
Wow.
like the death of Jesus, and Peter goes fishing, and Jesus finds the disciples and pulls them back in and starts showing them what's going on. Like, those are the kinds of moments I think we have missed that
Mm-hmm.
element so much in
Mm-hmm.
modern Christianity. And as a result, a couple things have happened. People have either totally lost their faith,
Uh-huh.
or
Stunted
they've
growth.
they've developed their own folk theology, or
Yeah.
they've their own
Mm-hmm.
belief system
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that's not rooted, which, like you said, you
Mm-hmm.
call yourself a Christian and not even really be
Mm-hmm.
committed to the teachings of Jesus. And so,
Fundamental teachings. Fundamental.
yeah,
And and I think that it's important here to note too that there were probably things that Jesus said to the crowd that people, whether we know when he said, "You follow me with the fishes and loaves, except you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you have no part of me." And the Bible
yeah,
said, and many went back and followed him no more.
yeah,
And so I think that, but I think that, I mean, that's obviously an extreme example, but I think that there were probably many things that Jesus said to the crowd that people were like, what did he mean by that?
100%.
I don't even get it. What was he saying? And, and bro, for real, it might be that somebody said, well, let's go ask him. And somebody may say, are you serious? There's no way we could get to Jesus.
Right,
Look,
right,
there's no way we could. And they're like, well, let's go ask one of his disciples.
Yeah.
And this is the thing too, where, you know, if we have a balanced missional ecosystem, it also creates a balanced, not only a balanced missional community, but it also produces a balanced biblical community where there may be you know, you may have a church of 5,000 people and you're preaching to that church at the meta level, and people are like, I don't understand what he was talking about. Let's go ask him. Like, are you kidding me? He's
Yeah.
got he's got another service in 30 minutes he's got to preach.
Right.
Well, let's go talk to one of his disciples. The expectation was, watch this, that the people who spent that personal time with Jesus were capable of reproducing the understanding of the teachings.
Yeah.
If there's the leadership bottleneck of the singular system.
Sure.
If the church is operating off of one gear, then what happens is people are sitting out there going, what did he mean exactly? And so then what happens is there's a lot of this is what's so crazy too. There's a lot of churches where, because of that, the Sunday sermon is dumbed down to where
Sure.
everybody sitting out there could understand it.
Yeah.
And I have conversations with people that sometimes be like, well, I really like that church because his sermons are really simple and I can understand them.
Yeah.
And I
Relatable.
think that what happens is we need to be able to say, you know what? Jesus didn't dumb it down. In fact, sometimes Jesus spoke in really cryptic ways. Sometimes Jesus spoke in ways where his disciples are like, why don't you just tell them plain?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
But here's the deal. He said, no, because it's been given to you to know. So what happens? They can't get to Jesus, but they could get to you. And so in a balanced missional ecosystem, Kris, there are people in that congregation that are capable of carrying on one-on-one conversations with people
Sure.
as good as I can.
Sure. Absolutely. 100%. All right. We're up against the clock a little bit, so we're going to have to, I think this one we can nail through, but I want to get this one. So
I kind of did a little bit right there.
you did. That's why I said that, because you
Yeah.
kind of started leading right into it. But
Yeah.
but then the next level. Okay, so we started out. We talked about the crowd, the corporate gathering. The next level. I shouldn't say next level because I don't want to be linear. But the next component of the missional ecosystem: homes and communities, mid-sized meetings. Then the next component would be small discipleship connections. You know, the 12 and the 3 are the model and the example that Jesus did. But then you did have one-on-one engagement, which is personal missionary living. So give us the rundown. One-on-one engagement. I do think that a lot of our missional efforts. So I think if it's a 2-gear system, I think a lot of the efforts have either been at the crowd level or the one-on-one level. Right?
Yeah.
So I think
Sunday sermon or Bible study.
One-on-one at a kitchen table doing a Bible study.
Yeah.
So talk just about one-on-one engagement, personal missionary living, what that means for us.
Okay. One-on-one is still part of a balanced missional ecosystem.
100%.
It still could be part of it could be the entry point, or it could be the termination point of where, like a termination point in electricity, like electrical is where something's grounded. So it could be that somebody got entrance at the crowd level and said, I don't understand anything what I'm hearing. And somebody comes along and says, well, man, why don't I come over to your house? I got a Bible study. We'll sit down. We'll talk about it, whatever. It could be that. It could be that you are in a micro discipling group, what we call XGroups, or, you know, discipleship groups. You could be in a small, intimate, intensive discipleship group, and somebody says, man, there's just so much of this stuff I don't fully understand, from not because I don't have the Spirit, not because I'm not studying the scriptures. It's just that I don't have this really full, wide scope understanding of the Bible.
Yeah.
Bro, we've got a guy. There's a guy in our church named Austin Riddle.
Mm-hmm.
Austin Riddle came to our church. He was, he was a drug dealer. He came from a long way away, and man, God really has done some like miraculous works in his life. He was part of an X group, but he didn't have a rounded biblical, like a Bible study, biblical understanding of the whole scope of Scripture. From Genesis to Revelation, this is the plan of God, and this is how it looks in this one composite picture. I said, you know what? You need a Exploring God's Word Bible study. So what I'm saying is it could be somebody comes in from the crowd and they go, I don't understand what's being said. I don't know what Jesus said. And a disciple says, why don't I come over to your house and we'll talk about some of this stuff? It could be a coworker that says, look, I don't think I'm ready to go to church. I've done that. I know what it is.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm ready to go to church. And it could be a person saying, well, would you be open to, coming over to my house? We'll get some pizza and hang out. So it could be the entry point. It could be the termination point. It
Sure.
could be part of the whole composite picture.
Sure.
In a balanced missional ecosystem, you could literally have a person who's Sunday part of the crowd, once a month or biweekly or however you do it, might be a part of a small group ministry. They may be in an X group and also in a one-on-one Bible study. All four of those places serving different things to help create and help that person be missional and be like Christ and understand the community.
And
That's
not
a balanced missional ecosystem.
and not the linear process, right? They should all feed each other, and
They all feed each other, and not just like one up or this one here sits between
right.
this one and this. No, it's like it could be crowd to X group. It could be X group to crowd. It could be X group to mid-size meeting. It could be one-on-one to X. That's a
crowd to
missional.
one-on-one. You have somebody that comes to crowd and they need some, personal guidance and direction. It feeds
Yeah,
everything. So
yeah, that's a balanced missional ecosystem.
man, that's so good. All right, I'm gonna close it by reading. You wrote this, and so I'm gonna give you credit. I'm gonna give you the props on this because I think this is the summary that I think it makes so much sense. Jesus didn't just preach to the crowds. He cultivated an entire missional ecosystem from the public square to the dining table, from the 70 to the 12, down to a single thirsty Samaritan. Jesus moved fluidly through every space where transformation could take place. That's the model we're reorienting to, not just one gear, but the whole kingdom transmission. Bro, that's it right there. That is the essence of everything that we're talking about. How do we get to this place where you've got all of these things happening and functioning within the body that produces the mission? If we're really going to have multiplication, right? Ultimately, the engine of multiplication, because it's intensified transformation, it's intensified multiplication, happens in those X groups. But you need all of these components together, working together in harmony, in synchrony. They need to be working together. Otherwise you're going to be, just short of your potential, not quite able to reach where you want to get to.
And a person may not be able, Kris, to understand what kingdom community looks like in us. This is what it looks like in us. They may not be able to pick that up in a one-on-one Bible study setting, and they don't have the relational engagement for it to happen at the crowd level.
Sure.
You almost have to have that, either the micro discipling level or that mid-size level, to actually be able to understand this is what the kingdom looks like in us. This is what it is in an organic Jesus movement. This is what the kingdom looks like when we begin to model it in and among each other. By this shall all men know that you're my disciples, that you love one another. And so there's a witness that happens at the macro that it is a little bit different than the witness that happens at the micro. And so some serve what others can't. Some serve in deeper or more unique ways what those others serve, but all together they create a full composite picture that will help us most effectively reach our world in 2025 and beyond.
Man, that's so good. That's so good. Great conversation today. I think this is going to be one of those that we use, you know, as pastors in churches, want to pursue more what it looks like to be a mobilized missional church, what it's like to have that kind of a culture. And this is going to be one of those podcast episodes that we draw or push people back to, like, you need to go listen to this, you go watch this, check this out, because it explains a lot about what the goal is, what we're driving towards. And then let's talk about the journey of how to get there. So if you're a pastor or a leader and you're interested in getting more information, check us out, thedillinghamgroup.org. We've also got some things coming, Ken, new website, all that kind of stuff is going to be coming in the near future. We'll give you more updates on that, but check us out. We'd love to connect with you. There's a contact form. You can fill that out and we will get with you. So appreciate everybody joining us today, bearing with us through a little time readjustment. So thank you for jumping on, and we look forward to coming back to you next Tuesday around 10 o'clock.